Hello, and welcome to the Parks at Playground. I'm your host, Amal Kumar, and today I'm joined by Nicolas Breedlove, founder and CEO of AAA State of Play and MVB Playgrounds, to explore his philosophy on play, leadership, and the challenges shaping the playground industry. To start, can you introduce yourself, your role across AAA State of Play and MVB Playgrounds, and how you describe what your company actually does beyond building playgrounds?
Absolutely. A lot of great questions there. So, Nicolas Breedlove, founder and CEO of NVB. We have a variety of assets. So, we have playgroundequipment.com, playgrounds.com, AAA State of Play, playequipment.com. We really went out there and bought a lot of domains probably about 10 years ago. Um, but we my role in the company is always changing. When I first started, it was one thing. You're a kid, you're fresh out of college, and I had no idea what I wanted to do, and just got this rare introduction to the playground equipment industry, and from there, turned that into one of the first retailers online back about 20 years ago, and uh, the other company that we were competing against in the online marketplace went out of business. So it was right during the recession, and it allowed just a great introduction where there was no competition for probably about 5 to 7 years. Allowed us a lot of growth, and eventually we bought playgroundequipment.com and created a brand off of that, and we are a private label manufacturer there. We supply to around 230 or so distributors across the US under that label. And we have operations in Savannah and Houston and Greenfield, Indiana. We've got scaled to about 200 employees. And, it's my role, it has always changed. Over the last few months, though, I've taken more of and I've always had an obsession with marketing. And I've taken on more of a role in that going forward, probably for the next 3 or 4 quarters. I'll probably be attached to the marketing division.
Hmm. So you're basically like thriving straight out the gate, basically.
I got fortunate, when there's if anybody in this industry for long enough has seen some of the lower end product in the world. So there's manufacturers all over the United States. There's this one specific one out of Culver or Falkville, Alabama. It's right across the border there, and right down where the spaceship is on 65, and they. It's just this town. It's got about 4 or 5 manufacturers of play equipment, and they make play equipment specifically for home schools, for daycares, child cares. A lot of guys drive with those trailers on the back of their truck full of playground equipment. You might see it every now and then and mistake it for a carnival. And that is how I got started in this business. And it's a rough life. You're driving, you're calling phone books. Back then it was phone books. Nowadays, I don't remember the last time I've seen a phone book. But you're calling every day. It taught me a lot of really core skills, being able to talk to anybody about anything for any reason, pick up the phone. It's a skill that not a lot of younger people seem to obsess over, is being able to talk to people. So it's just always been able to be one of my, it was never a skill of mine until I was forced into it. So I'm grateful for that, but it taught me very quickly that I didn't want to be on the road 365 days a year. So I immediately saw there was an opportunity online because nobody else was doing it. And that's kind of where we got our initial intro into the virtual marketplace for playground equipment.
So, I mean, you've been doing this for quite a while. So when you hear people say like the term playground company, they often think playground equipment, right? So you talk more about philosophy and purpose. What do people misunderstand about you and your work?
I think that as a younger entrepreneur, I made a lot of mistakes, as we all do when we are up and we're scaling. We don't know exactly what we're doing. We have a lot of mistakes. Uh, And back then, I couldn't really honestly tell anybody, why is it that I sell playground equipment? What do I want to do, right? I went to school for horticulture. I thought I was going to get into the business of growing plants. You're from Iowa. You guys know plenty about plants, right? It's all over the place, right? And I thought, yeah, I'm going to get into this business, but I immediately knew that wasn't for me. I've got not great skills when it comes to growing. So, back then, when I initially I thought I was going to be the cheapest. I was going to be the lowest price. If somebody asked me, why do business with you? Initially, it was I was the lowest price online. And that helped me attract a really great audience, a big audience. It's a widespread. But there's a certain point where you need to be more than just price, and you need to be relationship based, and you need to be beyond that. You need to be able to talk to your customer in the way they need to be talked to. um, because slowly but surely everybody has migrated over to the online space. It was much easier to do business when there was only 4 or 5 people doing online, because nobody gave it the second look. So now, I'd say once a year I go and visit a group of CEOs out in Mexico, Missouri. It's a little town just west of or just east of Columbia, Missouri. And they asked me, I remember the first time they asked me, I didn't know how to answer it. They said, why would we do business with you? And I answered it the same way. I was like, because I'm the cheapest, because blah, 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 blah. And, it took me probably 2 or 3 years to really connect with, why is it that I do what I do? And for me, there's 3 reasons why we exist and why we climb, if you would. And excuse me. We do it for the kids to, we create a space for them to be able to take that calculated risk. It's a place for them to take that adventure and that risk where they're able to. There's guardrails, artificial, sometimes not artificial, but it's a place for them to take that risk and get confidence. Building that confidence is a huge part of any kid's activity on a playground. The second part for NVB and for myself, and why I do what I do, is we are the first step. Any playground company, but us specifically, we know that we are there because we give operators, meaning parks or schools or whatever it might be, HOAs, where community begins. So that means for me, that's like, it's where you meet your neighbors. It's where kids learn each other's names. It's where you make friends. It's where community begins, and community is so lacking nowadays in society. So I think it's just such an integral part of our future as America, just to have that, continue to have that. And I'm very proud to be able to be a part of that. And the third reason why we do what we do is because we are able to provide a great place for people to be able to make a living, whether that's our distributors or that's our internal staff, and, live a fulfilled life, because that's why we do this stuff. So that is my drawn out answer. I have a very scoped version of that sometimes, but that is kind of why we do what we do.
I mean, that's a lot of reasoning, but it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into it. I know that you've been vocal about some uncomfortable truths in the playground industry, but I really want to know, what is the biggest issue you think is within the industry, and like, why are they avoiding it?
The biggest issue in the industry. I think that they go after trends. And I think that's always the case. I mean, the kids don't really care about trends. The trend right now is towers, and it's that going up, right? It's huge, massive things that become monuments to that town. And that's really cool. It's neat. We sell them. I'm not going to complain about selling a big structure or anything, but I do think as a parent, you have to look at that and say, if my kid gets stuck at the top of that, am I going to honestly want to get up there? And can I get up there? And if those two things aren't true, like, why are we doing it this way? I get being able to challenge kids, but are we challenging them because they asked for it, or because a landscape architect asked for it, or because it looks pretty? And if it looks pretty, I just think it would be really great to think about both sides of the perspective, being the parent and the child. because I understand it's a hard line to merge, but I do think that chasing trends is often it's often what any industry is about.
So you're talking about like interaction instead of like following what everyone else is doing, what they're starting with a certain trend. You're basically saying like, okay, how are we going to challenge these kids, to do what they would like to do, and also like how are we going to do it in the right way? Because if parents have to get involved, and other people have to get involved, and you know, because it might seem a little dangerous, or not even just dangerous, it just might not feel right, right? That's that's probably not always the best case.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things that playgrounds combat on a daily basis is in almost every adult's hand. 90% of their day, it's their phone, right? And kids nowadays have that phone, and so every playground needs to be more and more. And I get it to a point. We are trying to compete against the ever, entertainment sources around them, whether that's phones, iPads, televisions. So it's challenging to make it challenging enough to keep their attention, because that's what it's about. It's about getting them outside, getting them active, and getting them together, because the more they socialize, the better off they are.
Yeah. So Nick, I know you mentioned that you got started in the industry, right? And you've been doing this for quite a while, and you briefly talked about how you got into it, but I want to know the exact moment, like what originally pulled you into the playground space, and at what point did it stop being about like structures, and when did it start being about more about like people and communities?
I think that I graduated college second time from Colorado State, and I thought, maybe I'll do something. Maybe I didn't know what I was going to do, if I was going to do horticulture. And my dad, there was a lot of people doing in my dad's industry was clothing, so they were selling clothes to all the farm stores, Farm and Fleet, Tractor Supply, and so on. And a lot of these sales reps, one way or the other, they went into business, in the playground business. Um, and one of them specifically that introduced my dad to it, his son and I work together now, and they are Noah's Play out of Oklahoma, Edmond, Oklahoma. Great people. And they're also a customer of mine, and I'm a customer of theirs. And if it wasn't for Shan Shepard down there, I think that I don't know that I would definitely be here right now in regards to that introduction. Um, at the moment that I decided to stay, I think that was when I realized, that spark, that excitement that came from being able to create something online and be able to create something that nobody else was doing, because it drove a little bit of disruption. Right now, if you don't have a online property of some type, you are non-existent in this business, any business really. And back then, everybody looked down on me and said, this kid's never going to sell a playground, never going to sell a $50,000 playground or a $100,000 playground or whatever it was. The price doesn't matter, but they didn't think it could happen online. And it did, and it helped disrupt the entire industry. And now if you're not online with playground equipment, you pretty much don't exist.
So basically, it's just all about having something new. You wanted to start something fresh, right? And also, people were not on board with what you're thinking about or trying to do. So I guarantee you must have got a lot of satisfaction breaking through that barrier, right? Um,
It was a very unique time, man. I remember when that other company, our competitor back then, went out of business, and our phones like tripled overnight as far as phone calls. And it allowed me a lot of, right where I'm at right now doing marketing. I started, I designed, I coded the websites back then. I don't anymore, but I did code. I did a lot of the SEO, a lot of the marketing outreach. It was all in house, and it was all from me. And it was just this new thing I had never done, and I thought it was super exciting. So it just, as I learned new things, it was a lot of fun. I'd say the less fun that happened was, as you scale and you start to wear too many hats, As any business operator that scales without planning. Um, and when you're growing fast, it's really hard to plan. The less fun happens once you start growing, especially at high speed.
Yeah, it gets a little bit more serious, if that makes sense. I mean, it is serious, but you know, you have to actually be more critical about things. Was there
You,
a specific?
you
Sorry,
go ahead. Go ahead. No, please.
I just wanted to know. Was there a specific moment where you realized that traditional approach, like the traditional approach to playground design, was no longer serving kids the way it should?
I mean, I think that even today, I think playground design is, it's it has a long way to go, and I think that the tools nowadays with AI the way they are, I think it allows us a whole different perspective to look at things and being able to approach and analyze data on a completely different level than we've ever thought we'd be able to. Right? Like I can I can download every salesperson's phone calls for the last 3 6 months, whatever the time frame is. I can analyze trends about pricing, design, colors, whatever it is, right? You try and do that a year, 2 years, 3 years ago, didn't happen, right? And the same can be said with design. I think that there's a lot that can be gone on there as well. There's a lot of cheaper tools that are available, more so now than ever, where you can add all sorts of enhancements to playgrounds where you're tracking a variety of movements. You can track use patterns. There's all different things we've tested in the field in regards to that. So there's a lot of opportunity with technology nowadays, more so than there ever has been.
Yeah. So you often talk about building confidence through risk. Do you think modern design has become so hesitant to let kids take risks, like struggle or fail?
I think it's a pendulum, right? It's like right now it's the lack. I think if anything, we've gone the opposite way of encompassing that risk factor, and we've allowed a lot of risk. But it's just like anything else in society, whether it's politics or whatever it might be, fashion. It's a pendulum, comes and goes, and it wipes everything out in between sometimes. And right now, there's a lot of risk on that playground, on general playgrounds, and I think there's a lot of ground in between. I think we have to continue to look more about function and what is it that kids. It's one of the conversations I had with a major childcare provider a couple of months ago, and they were asking me about design. Similar question, and my answer to them was, we're selling stuff that they were selling in World War II still. So, has design really come that far? Now, if I put a happy face and an emoji sign on a merry-go-round, is it not still a merry-go-round? It is still the same piece that my great grandfather played on. It might be slightly slower, maybe it's faster, I don't know. But the reality I don't think that it's come far enough for the way that technology has changed children's lives. So I think that there's a lot further to go, in my opinion. It hasn't caught up, to be honest.
How do you personally balance safety regulations?
Well, from my perspective, I try and push that line as hard as I can, without breaking it, because everybody in this industry lives in the gray, and they live there because they're trying to serve both purposes, right? They're trying to serve the people who want that to be delicate with the children's safety, and they're trying to serve people who are trying to serve that ultra risk taking. And I think the balance in between is kind of where I talk about there, where it's just that lack of that design that has caught up with the children of today, in regards to what really takes their attention and what do they want to really do. So as far as regulation wise, it's always pushing the edge, to the point where we are still protected as a company, and the users are protected because, as I said, that number one reason why we do this is for kids to take some sort of risk. That risk doesn't have to be towards a physical. It could be mentally. It could be psychological. There's all sorts of risks that a user should be able to take on a piece of playground equipment. So it's just about that challenge in whatever form it takes.
So you criticize what you call performative accessibility in the industry. What what does meaningful accessibility actually look like in practice?
Uh, you know, I think that's where you go into what's accessible and what isn't, and when you have the rules where they're very non-restrictive. Um, I think they're more restrictive for our websites than they are for playgrounds. You know, I mean, the reality is I think it's WAAG or whatnot for a website accessory of items guide, or you've got to have certain font colors and this and that, and you can't have too much contrast in this color. Um, Meanwhile, you can put a playground down, you could put a transfer station down, and you can call it accessible. Um, Now, as a kid as a child that can't walk, are they going to really be able to use anything there? No. Are they going to be able to assess much? No. Can they assess an overhead ladder? No. But does the rules say they can? Yeah. Does almost every company use that to their own advantage? Yeah. Is equipment a lot of money, and does it cost a lot to design that type of equipment? Unfortunately, yeah. And that's the bottom line, is it's all about cost. And that's why those projects, when they happen, they are large, they're well funded, and they're usually well organized. Um, so I think if anything, it's just a stigma in the industry for me to looking at the way we approach it and say, but there's no changing that, though, right? Everybody's going to continue to call things ADA compliant because they are compliant. Um, and I think that there's a lot more, just like everything else, there's a lot more that could be done with the accessibility. But it's like so many things, it requires a huge, monumental amount of space just because of the ramp time, the ramp length, and the turn radiuses and all of the different functions that are required in there. And then when you do the towers like they're doing nowadays, they're not calling those playgrounds, right? They're calling them amusement equipment. And if they're amusement equipment, then they don't have to apply by any of those rules. The play area does, but not the playground. So then it's just another level of gray, right? So now you don't have a playground, you have a tower that's technically an amusement attraction, and then you have equipment on the ground, and that equipment is almost always compliant because it's accessible by a wheelchair. So it's just one of the, again, like I said, it's just the entire industry lives in the gray.
That's interesting. It's like a little get around, amusement instead of playground. And
Yeah,
weird. Never thought about it like that. Huh. Yeah. That's
there's
something.
always a way to get around, unfortunately, if especially when you write the rules.
Hmm. So, why do you think some of the largest manufacturers struggle to deliver true inclusion despite having more resources than ever, or more resources than anyone else?
I think it's because for them, I don't know that if I can't speak on behalf of them. I think that would be unfair of me. But from my perspective, when I look at members of those organizations, I wonder if they know why do they do what they do, and is it just a slogan, or is it meaningful? Is the opportunity to deliver that accessibility meaningful impact, or is it just because they're looking to provide a dollar in their pocket? Which is it? Because that a group like the Miracle Fields and those very similar organizations like that, those are meaningfully led by people who have had children that have had serious disabled ability, wheelchair bound children, and they are in that because they are devoted to that. As an organization, it's harder to believe that they're that in it for anything like that. Why is it that they just want to provide play for all? Does anybody believe that? Does anybody believe anything anybody with 1,000 employees says? And if they do, great. I believe it when I walk into Chick-fil-A. They do a great job of serving a sandwich, right? Um, but not every organization is that well run, especially when you scale to that large. So I think once those bigger companies, I think at the end of the day, it's just like I learned as a small guy getting up to a medium guy. It's hard to scale, and when you have that many divisions and that many organizations, it's even harder to have one unified vision of where do you want to go as an organization and what kind of person do you want to be, and does all of these people believe in the same vision as you? Because I've never heard that approach from any of the big guys. I've seen their slogans, but I've never heard anybody on their team speak of it with passion and compassion.
Right. Yeah. Again, it's about care, really, because you mentioned like when you go to certain places, like I feel like you're all about bonding and building relationships. You're all about you know connecting, and I feel like that's like one of your biggest things, really. I admire that.
Yeah, it's the relationships that we have here. I've had employees that have been with me for 19 years. The oldest, longest running employee retired last year. He would have been here 20 this year. He's still a temporary. I think he's part time, but we've got a lot of people going up on 10, 15, 18 years. So I love relationships. I love people, and it's the blessing of being able to do this is being able to being able to be a part of so many people's lives, and that's one thing I'm always grateful for, is just being able to be a part of all these small businesses and being able to be a part of all of what they do, because at the end of the day we touch thousands and thousands and thousands of lives every year, and I never thought I'd be able to do that, so it's a pretty amazing thing.
Yeah, it reminds me of my mom, because Zamarins, and she's all about connecting with the people and community, and that's cool. Yeah, but anyway, many schools and communities expect playgrounds to last decades with so little to no maintenance, right? Why is that expectation unrealistic, and what problems does it create in the long term?
It's something I think about a lot. It's funny. I think it starts at the sale of the playground equipment, and it's that you know we're selling something that is the price of a what used to be a car. Nowadays a car is probably twice as much, but it used to be a car, and we're selling a 15 to 30,000 dollar item, and we don't talk to them about what it takes to maintain it over the lifetime. We don't talk to them about how much surfacing it's going to require, and we don't talk to them about what kind of maintenance do they need to do on a yearly or monthly basis. We never even approach that. I've seen sales pitches from every major organization. I never hear it, and I think that part of it is because of they don't make money on it. Part of it is because it's a stigma to the sale. You don't want to tell everybody what they don't want to hear. And for the most part, there's a lot of equipment that is it's meant to be out there for 15 years with being untouched. But that doesn't mean that it really should be, right? And we all know, that there's 400,000 plus hospital visits. There's a lot of potential injuries in there, and I think that at the end of it, it starts at that salesperson, and that they're sometimes I think it's just a lack of forethought. What is it? What would cause that person to really want to talk about what is the future cost? What's the future cost of owning this playground? And park districts, they know they have to maintain it, right? School districts, they know they have to maintain it. to a point. They might not even have the staff. They might not have the preparation for it. They might not have the training for it. Those things that may or may not be true. Um, and depending on the size of those organizations, the smaller schools, the smaller parks, the less people they have, the less management they have available to even devote to that time there. So what you end up with is what you have a playground and it's 5 years old and it's a hazard, and it could be a hazard after a year. I've seen boulders and they kids just pick up mulch and they move on, and before you know it, there's no surfacing left. And it doesn't matter if your equipment's safe. If you've got any surfacing, you're still an unsafe playground. So, I think it's definitely, I think it's something that could be solved. I just don't think that anybody really wants to really dedicate a lot of time to it.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of districts, there you can tell there's ones that care and there's some that do not as much in terms of money. Everything's always money related, and I feel like having the effort to actually go out and actually inspect, it's something that not a lot of people do, and I feel like it's an art that we need to pick up on more. I mean, because we want our communities to be more safe. We want our communities to be better, right? So, I mean, it's all about just checking in, I mean, if it's not even just 1 year, at least, like, if once every month or, every few months at least, because like you said, anything could be a hazard after even a year. So, it just depends, right?
Yeah, from my perspective, when I think about safety and I think about the inspection part of it, I I definitely I think it's definitely underserved, and a lot of those communities when they I've got a friend and he's in charge of a park district up in Illinois, and they had a lawsuit, and it changes your perspective once you've been sued, right? And once that hits, the legal obligations of that definitely change that organization forever, right? And that organization will never be the same, right? Maybe, assuming that ownership of that philosophy stays in place forever. And you can see that in buying patterns, and you have parks where you won't allow swings, parks where they won't allow roller slides. Why won't they allow these things? Because there was an injury, because there was a lawsuit, because it changed the way they have to do business forever. And why was there an injury? Because they didn't inspect, because they didn't take their time, because they didn't approach it the way they needed to as an org, and then they got in trouble, unfortunately.
Right. And I mean, business is starting to grow even more, right? Because more of these lawsuits start to happen. And like Parks App, we're getting more business now because they're starting to realize there's big corporations out there that you can purchase through, right? To audit, whatever, inspect, but they don't always do a thorough job. They're not always doing the best job because they really care about money in terms of, like Parks App and Xamarin's, they're more about like actually going in depth. Like I'm not trying to promote, I'm just being honest. This is what
Yeah,
I've witnessed, what I've seen, you know. There's a reason why I'm doing this podcast because like I want to bring awareness because this is true,
yeah.
you know. But like when budgets are limited, what design or planning decisions deliver the most value over time? That was a question I've been trying to ask for a while.
Budgets are limited. What design and planning? What?
Oh, so basically, I'll say that question again. When budgets are limited, what design or planning decisions deliver the most value over time? Want me to say it again? Or?
No, no. It's a good question. I think that when things are limited, I think you go down to inner city, right? New York City. You go deep in the city. You're not going to find a lot of plastic, right? You're going to find metal. You're going to find metal slides, metal tic tac toes, metal everything. It's going to be designed for it's designed for anything. And that's kind of how they design equipment in Mexico as well, right? And a few other of the Latin America countries do that. Not so much in Asia. In Asia, a lot of plastic everywhere. US, a lot of plastic. It's easier to replace plastic. It's easy to make it. Um, but in certain communities in certain areas, it's better for them to spend a little bit more, even if they get less, because you're going to have less issues with that piece, because it is very, it's hard to destroy metal. And when you're in a public setting without a lot of oversight, you need something that is the most durable thing that you can walk away from. And I think that sometimes it might be worth going down on what you're getting and up in quality than it is, if you're out in Iowa and you got a playground out by the cornfield, that's okay. You can have a lot of plastic. You're going to be able to supervise it. Great, no big deal. But if you're in downtown Chicago and you never know what who's going to be walking by the playground at what time of night, probably best if that thing is going to be able to take a baseball bat to it and nobody's going to know the difference tomorrow. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about. I think that saves long-term money, even though it costs more upfront. So it's just like anything else when it comes to that. Sometimes you get what you pay for. And in that case, I think that kind of design definitely helps. And then also, you have to think about your long-term commitment here. Port and play surfacing, those types of seamless surfaces, they cost a lot. They do. They cost a ton of money. So, if you do a loose fill, which is perfectly acceptable, we do a lot of loose fill surfacing. Everybody does. Make sure that you budgeted enough, which means, again, don't spend your whole dollar at that upfront thing. You've got to be able to budget for not just year one, but year 2, year 3, year 10, year 20, just like any other piece of equipment. And I think that that's my advice to people is think about it like an equipment piece and think about what is the cost of that long-term, that maintenance.
And also in the environment, right? So I'm also think like weather has to play a big part of it too, right? I feel like that's a big thing as well.
Yeah, one of the first playgrounds we sold was in Fort Richardson, Alaska. And then we sold, I think, 7 or 8 truckloads of equipment. This is the first time I learned about ice road trucks and the ice road truckers and barges, all sorts of things I got to learn about on that sale. And, the customer got a playground, a lot of playgrounds, obviously. They got their first one, they started installing it, and they put it down. I don't even know. I think the guy dug the hole like 12 feet deep. It was excessive, but apparently it wasn't excessive because the frost line, if there is a frost line, I don't even think there is a frost line up there. But anyways, all we saw when he took pictures, he said, "Where does the decks go?" And all we saw were post caps on top of the ground. And he had buried the rest of the post in the ground. And, so that's the first time I really thought about what does it take to really install in this climate? And, why did this major manufacturer not think of this? A, but B, why did the customer not think of it? It was one of those learning moments for me. And then, over the years, we've done plenty of seaside projects and, you learn your lesson once and you never make that mistake again when it comes to being close, even close to the ocean. You've got to make sure you've got your stainless. You've got to make sure your plastic is also got stainless. You've got to really protect what you're doing in that regard. So environment takes a huge part of it. And then you've got heat, which is, that sun is everywhere nowadays. And the kids can't use it 6 months a year. They're not going to, and that's not my goal. So making sure that they have a shade when it's necessary is absolutely a requirement because, you don't want that playground to be so hot that they can't use it. So all of a sudden it's, again, not worth it.
Yeah. I remember when I was younger, I used to go like on those metal slides. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's so hot. Oh God.
Yeah. There was a company here out of Anderson, Indiana. They were called American Playgrounds. They made a spiral slide. It looks kind of like a bowl and they pull it apart and that's how they would manufacture it. But they made slides back in the, 70s and 80s and they did a lot of them across the Midwest. But they're really cool slides, and I was on them too as a kid, and you know, very interesting. That times have changed for slides, though, for sure.
Yeah, thankfully.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the kids, even my kids, could use a little beaten up once in a while.
Yeah, I guess it kind of disciplines you in a way. I don't know. It makes you learn. That's
You
for sure.
learn really quick how to get down a slide without burning your butt.
Yeah, literally. So you said your goal isn't just to serve customers, but to provide your team and partners a path to fulfilled life. How does that philosophy show up inside your organization day to day?
The organization, we have our core values that we live by on a daily basis, and how does it show up how does it show up? It shows up in the activities that we're doing. It shows up in our HR. One of the things that we've changed as an organization in the past probably 7 to 8 years is being able to have an um, HR department that you can rely on. And then from there, you build our core values. When I first started out, I had was probably 7 or 8 years into it, and we had a little bit of betrayal within the organization. Took a while to get that out, got through that, and kept scaling. But during that period of time, I realized, how much, as a younger person, I thought core values didn't really mean anything, and they really don't unless they mean something to you, and unless you live by them, unless you hire by them, unless you fire by them. And until we were able to do that, didn't mean anything. So, I wasn't able to reach that peak of being able to necessarily live up to that fulfilled life until we were able to provide a place where we can meaningfully, do what we say and do what we are supposed to as an org. And, got a lot of people, fortunately, great people that, support me at all levels. They support each other. So, like I always tell everybody, though, fulfilled life means whatever it means to them. Could mean a million things to a million people. So, I think it all started with core values at the end of the day, and coming up with those was its own fun process. You start off, and we started off with maybe 12, then we ended up with 6. Now we're at the 4 in which we're at. We build a positive community, we commit as owners, we live a growth mindset, and we pursue wow. And there's probably not a lot of people in the organization who've been there for less than a year that don't hear those phrases on a daily or weekly basis, just because they're in our huddles, they're in our shout outs, they're in our tacticals, they're part of our reviews, they're part of our one-on-ones, they're part of our quarterlies, they're part of our annuals. They're integrated at every level of the organization. And if you're able to go all in on it like that, I think you can make a real impact. And otherwise, you're not living up to it.
Hmm. So you often mention that your company's never experienced down seasons. What disciplines or leadership habits have made that possible?
I think that, I think I'd love to pretend like I'm a masterful leader, right? But it again goes into that approach of having the right people in the right seats for me. Um, you know, uh, that person that isn't in that right seat always, they say they cost you, 3 times whatever their salary is, and I think that's correct in any industry, public, private, or otherwise. So, I think over the past ever since we've really had an actual HR department, I think that, we've been able to hire correct. And, the more that we get in touch with that hiring and building teams, because that's how we are excelling. I could have a visionary in one role, and I know that I need to support that role with an operator, because they might be able to know what they want to do. They might be able to want to take some new operations to the warehouse units and change the way we're loading pallets, but they're not going to be able to operationally execute on that correctly without an operator to be able to get that through. So sometimes you have to have personalities, different ones, supporting each other. And we use a variety of tools internally, like Culture Index, which is behavior analysis, and we hire off of that. And that's how it helps us make decisions. I should say we don't necessarily hire off of it strictly, but we definitely helps us make decisions. I think the more we are in touch with building teams and not just fulfilling roles, which is where we started, I think that has allowed us to continue to scale the way we've wanted to for as long as we have.
Hmm. So you've shared that though leadership and speaking engagements matter more than trade show booths, why do ideas and education outperform traditional marketing in your view?
Why does so like when it comes to a trade show, the trade show industry has been in decline for a long time. I don't think there's a doubt in anyone's mind of that. But I definitely think that being able to talk to a room full of people, 10 people, 20 people, 100 people, whatever it is, I think there's 10 times the value in that than being able to sit out at a booth and try to sell your goods, because at the end of the day, you're able to talk to them. They're able to connect with you at a personal level, see what kind of person they're dealing with, and whether or not they would even like to do business with that person. Because it doesn't even matter if they have business to do. If you can create a relationship, that's great, and at the end of the day, a lot of myself, I'm not out there just to make relationships to use people and things like that. I'm out there to help everybody, and there's not a lot of people that really are in it for that. So I think if you are, it really comes out a different way, and it really genuine. I hate that word sometimes, but if you can have that and really mean it, I think it goes a long way.
Hmm. Yeah, I get that. And like I really like to be um not I wouldn't say personal, but when you're interacting or doing things, right? I mean, genuine is a big thing. That's a part of building, right? So that's something I'd like to always consider.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I think that the more you can talk to people, though, especially in those types of environments, there's a lot to we can learn from each other, and there's a lot that we don't know about our customers, just as much as anything else. And the more I get to know my customer, the better off I am, because the better off I can serve them, the better off we can approach them, the better off we can, give them something that's useful to them. Because that is how I'm actually going to be useful to them, is by being useful to them. I could sell them a bill of goods all day long, but it's not going to do them any good if it's not of value to them. And, the more we understand what their pain points are, the more we understand, what that deep thing is, that real true root of the problem, then you can make a real impact.
Right. I like that. I agree. So to close, when someone listens to this episode from years from now, what do you hope they understand about the future of play and the role you're shaping it?
The future of play and the role I'm shaping it, I would say that technology has its input into play, um, for ways that we can't imagine, but that at the end of the day, play is still fundamentally just kids running around, and we can't lose sight of that. And hopefully, we don't.
And
Uh,
the role part, I meant to say, and your role in shaping it. I forgot that.
my
Yeah,
role in
so
shaping it. Well, I'm always pushing the envelope. I would say that you know, my goal is always to try and be at least a step and a half ahead of everybody else. So as long as I've taken my step and a half, I would say that one of the biggest steps that you can take as an org right now. I think that next moonshot is making sure you get to that AI advantage over the next, 3 months successfully as an org. I think it goes far beyond what a lot of orgs right now are looking at. It's not email, it's not this, it's not in supply chain logistics and whatever. It goes down to every layer of the organization. And, it's not about building efficiencies and reducing headcount and things like that. It is about, it's the same thing I tell all of my employees, AI is it's not AI that'll take your job. It's the guy that learns it, that's going to take your job. And I think that, there are so many opportunities and it will create so many more opportunities. And I can't wait to see what those are because there's just endless.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, well, thank you so much for being with me here today. It's been a pleasure. And I know it's been like a couple months coming, 2, 3 months.
Sorry about the reschedule, man.
No, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'm just glad I got to, learn from you and grow, and I learned a lot today and I really appreciate that. And for anyone that's out there listening, this is the Parks That Playground brought to you by Xamarin Solutions, with me, Amal Kumar, your host, and your guest, Nicolas Breedlove. And yeah, hope you had a great time listening in, and thank you. And yeah, that's it. I think I'm gonna end the recording there. Let's see. Yep. Okay.